Hey there, I'm Joe Schufo, and welcome to the Buying Sucks podcast.
And hey everyone, I'm Bryant Lee, and Joe and I have spent so much time selling software that in this podcast we now investigate how can buyers more effectively move through that buying process. So we're learning how to ask the right questions at those right moments so that you can make those better buying decisions.
That's right. And in this episode, we answer two questions. The first thing, what sales tools are out there and how are they influencing your buying decisions? And then we answer this trendy topic. What's an AI agent? What does that mean to you? And how can you use AI agents to either influence the way you find new software or know what's working against you?
All right, so we'll meet you out there in the episode and we'll talk a bit more about these topics. See you there.
See you in there.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Buying Sucks podcast. We're here again. Obviously, This is Bryant. You got Joe in
That's
the
right.
right-hand side.
I keep saying they're letting us come back, but actually we're just forcing this upon the world. So
thank you, Riverside, for allowing us to record ourselves talk again. For those of you that watched the last one, thank you. We appreciate it. We're getting used to it. It's a lot of fun. We love the feedback. We love the suggestions on what we should talk about and work on. So feel free to throw the good, the bad, and the ugly. Something that Joe taught me is something called the mom test, which is that when we ask for feedback, people don't always give it. They're trying to be nice. And I think we want the most savage feedback. Don't act like our moms. We need it. We're looking forward and hungry for it. So thanks again to those of you that listened.
I think something that's so interesting about the mom test, and right, the whole idea is how do you get feedback and even describe yourself in a way that even your mom could get it, right? And offer something that is useful. This ties into where we're going today. So if I were to tee up the concept a little bit, we want to talk about, as a buyer, how noisy the ecosystem is of sales acceleration. And we're going to focus on things like AI agents, which are very topical, very trendy, and also very confusing. Bryant, where's your head on that right now?
Trendy, topical, confusing. I think that sums it up pretty nicely. Something that we are committed to as we talk about things on this podcast is to shine a lens and think of it as a buyer, right? Someone that is going through the enterprise buying process and trying to understand what's happening on the other end. And something that I'm seeing is that there is a tremendous amount of investment and technology to grease the skids for selling organizations. I don't know about you, Joe, but the other day I took a step back and the number of different technologies is crazy. I mean, I don't even know if I could iterate through all of them in a short amount of time.
Even as both of us spending time on the sales engineering side, it used to just be, hey, we think we did a good demo. Did anyone record it so that others can learn from it or we can play it back? And then it evolved into recording software, which was now we've got it transcribed. Now we're scoring, now we're learning, now we're using those insights to change the value proposition, right? And influence others on product feedback. You're seeing this space continually expand. And the value is there, but you have to be really cognizant of that as a buyer, of everything you say is being analyzed to the nth degree. And it's being used to hopefully try and convince you as well.
Yeah, you get on a sales call, and you're like, hey, do you mind if I have this note taker on here? I can send you the notes. What's really happening is if it's an important thing, they're like, well, a leader's watching it, marketing is watching it, the sales rep is watching it. They're trying to figure out every little thing that happened in that deal to optimize it, to figure out how to move things forward. And it's not just words in a call, it's your actions on the website. It's an interaction through a flow. It's navigating these small interactions. It's just everything is being analyzed, and now we're seeing movement into things being more automated, right? They're trying to essentially remove the human element of sales, which it's ironic, right? You're like, man,
the last bastion of communication. Yeah.
Right. And, as we get into AI agents and we start talking about these different things, you'll see that I think selling will probably start becoming less and less human, and then maybe coming back to being more human again. We'll see how it goes. I think we're on this ride together with everyone else that's listening around how this is evolving.
That's right. So before we even get into this concept of AI agents, and we're going to define that or try as best as we can, let's take a step back. There are so many tools in, let's say, the revenue architecture or revenue acceleration space right now Brian, what are you seeing if we were to break down some of those things that as a buyer, you're going to experience this? Obviously, a CRM, right? Obviously, call recordings, but what other things are out there that we should be mindful of in this space?
Yeah. And it's not just call recordings. Like if you think of what people are doing with those recordings as well. So
Yeah.
from a conversational intelligence perspective, how are they picking out the words? There's sales rooms, there's tools for driving social selling. There's a tremendous amount of technology. Um, and I think the other day I was looking at G2 and it's just called sales acceleration. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting name for the category. And then you
Yeah.
click it and you're like, oh, there's like 32 categories inside of it. So I don't know about you, Joe. Are there any top ones that you think are trendy or are driving more activity and more noise today?
Yes. I think maybe the peak hype has passed for it, but sales rooms are everywhere. And I will tell you, when I think about being in a buying situation, it's scary. You get inside the vacuum of what decision do we make? There's so many people trying to influence it that you start to grab on to wherever clarity exists. Sales rooms, from a selling side, give a lot of clarity. It's all the documents we talked about, it's the demo recording we showed you. It's the things we'd love to influence your RFP are now wonderfully represented in one place. And I bring this up because as a buyer, you need to pull yourself back and not confuse availability of information as the right information to influence your buying decision, right? You really got to know, what are you in this for?
Yeah, and on that point around the availability of information, another thing that I think is challenging buyers, it's not a selling tool necessarily, is that people are doing more and more research about vendors using ChatGPT or using these
Yes.
newer research models or whatever they are, and they're scraping the internet of potentially AI generated content where vendors are trying to be me too. They're trying to fall into a category. They're trying to fall within the confines of that buying decision. So it's like it's really challenging, and I think enabling buyers to navigate that noise is going to
Yeah.
become really important as we dive into the more and more of these tools that are driving kind of what's in front of you at all times during a buying process.
100%. And Pep Lau over at Winter recently did some research on how our CMO's buying, how our CTO's buying, and the trend is pretty similar. You go to Google, you look for some terms, you go to ChatGPT, you ask some questions about who's the leader in this space. You go out and you ask some friends that are in your network. You look at Reddit, and then you start to go from a narrow list to a list where you've got some biases and hopefully more informed understanding. But to your point, as we get AI agents, as we'll talk about this, influencing the material that you consume, influencing the responses you get in communities, and potentially even influencing the narrow list you start with when you search a term, you've got to be mindful of this. Where is your compass? What are you going to reorient yourself back to? That's really important.
Yeah, and I think there's also the trustworthiness of how it got there.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
if you're googling it, there's all this ranking that happens. If you're using some of the newer Chat GPT components, those are being ranked as well, right? They're
Yeah.
searching the web just like we would.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of things to unpack there as a buyer, and I think the biggest challenge that buyers face right now is knowing where to focus their efforts, because I think they're going to get
Mm.
unlimited ways to try to evaluate, and
Yes.
knowing which one is the most effective for what you
Yep.
need, it becomes super important.
And let's not make it all doom and gloom. These things aren't bad. You could argue, if you're making a low risk buying decision, it is wonderful to quickly narrow your list down, to understand some of the pros and cons and make a decision. But as you get into higher price, more infrequent decisions, this is where the influence can have really negative ramifications on your business and maybe even your career, right? And that's some of the things we'll talk about, propensity for risk as well.
I agree with that in essence, right? Low risk, low stakes deals or buying decisions, go test, try. What I am seeing though, as I talk to buyers, is that these small decisions add up, right? And then you
Yeah.
get to all of a sudden you have one big decision that requires some deep integration, requires some implementation with these other tools, and all of a sudden these weren't low risk deals anymore. And I
Oh,
think the thing that we have to remember is that everything deserves a little bit of attention, right? You need to
yeah.
apply some type of framework to these buying decisions. But in I do agree, right? The idea that you can't apply the same amount of effort to everything.
Yeah.
And what's great is there's more tools now that allow you to apply a tremendous amount of effort,
Yeah.
perceived effort, which before would have been hours of X, Y, and Z research. You can do it in a couple
Yeah.
seconds, which is really cool. And we shouldn't knock these tools. Like, I use them all the
No.
time. They're incredible.
Yep. So good point. Death by a thousand cuts. You make a lot of small buying decisions. None of these products talk to each other. All of them want to upsell you. And now you have taken on the organizational overload of making them work together in your company, which sounds terrifying. Um, let's talk a little bit about how you can improve the buying experience. We're talking about all these tools. Are any of them helpful? Do we get into how AI is influencing all of this right now, even before we get into the concepts of AI agents?
For sure. One thing I want to say on all these tools, just on the selling side, is as a buyer, you may not be aware of this, and this depends, right? We might be talking to a lot of software companies buying software, and all
Yeah.
about these tools, but there are other industries, right, where you're not totally enveloped in the echo chamber that is B2B SaaS.
Yeah.
And you may not be aware of it, but something that's a massive trend right now is the huge investment of dollars that's going into trying to make it easier for companies to sell to you.
Yeah.
So of all those different categories or technologies that we shared, I mean, millions of dollars, right? People are pouring money into it because the most obvious thing for VCs to throw their money into is, how do we help our portfolio companies sell better? How do
Yes.
we drive
Yeah.
and increase spend? How do we? So just there is not only an army of tools, there's an
Yeah.
army of investment, and that investment always has some type of AI attached to it. So you're starting to see where the human element gets somewhat removed from the overall decision as you throw these tools into it.
That's right. And if you get a very random number from a local area code calling your phone, many people are probably realizing this is the first time they've been called by an AI SDR, right? Or someone
Mm.
who is selling to them. And it's not a person, it is AI curating a message based on what that company thinks is important, or maybe even a little bit of personalization into who you are when you pick up the phone. And that's a weird experience. But I think this is maybe the first time many people are realizing this is right at their front door now.
I saw an interesting post on LinkedIn around personalization and
Yeah.
how response rates jumped immediately the moment people started putting the name of who they were talking to in their email.
Yes.
And I do wonder, on this personalization topic, instead of total tangent, if people are going to get more creeped out than they are like into
Yes.
it.
I think we're reaching saturation of this tactic, right?
Yeah.
Seth Godin talks about in one of his marketing books that there was a newspaper that was the most subscribed newspaper of any city in the United States, and it was simply because they put people's names in it. So if you're in that town, you're seeing your name in the newspaper, celebrating your achievements, highlighting what's happening, and people love to see themselves in something. However, now we're starting to feel like we're being duped, right? It's okay, why are you using my name? Why are you referencing the college I went to or some obscure fact that used to impress people because you did your research?
Yeah.
Now it's just a little bit creepy, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost too accessible and too easy.
I'll be honest, like, when I see my name, I'm like, well, this probably isn't authentic, right?
Yeah.
Dear Bryant. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting. So we were jumping on AI agents, and
Yeah.
I think before we do, so you have all these different tools that
Yep.
are there. Honestly, they're all trying to implement some type of AI agent. And as Joe and I were trying to unpack these set of words, AI agents, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing and really interesting about how, I don't want to say misused, but the definition is really fuzzy. Like, what is an
Yes.
AI agent in practice? You see all these announcements from OpenAI. You see companies saying they are the AI agent for X,
Yeah.
but then that doesn't provide clarity.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that it's probably going to be pretty messy for a while
It's going to be messy.
as we settle into this term. I don't think it's going away.
No.
But let's spend a few minutes talking about that. So when we think about AI agents and just the raw definition, remove sales tech, Joe, what are you seeing the common trends? What do they do? Why are they different than your typical interaction with ChatGPT, for instance?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. And even as we think about this podcast, it's never to give you definitive answers as much as it is to show you what we're learning as we go out there and try to investigate and learn more. if I take a step back, and I think ChatGPT is a good reference point because it's in itself is becoming more agentic. But when you think about AI agents, it's about using AI, so an LLM in most cases, to then take action autonomously. So it's one thing to say, hey, ChatGPT, what are the 3 best CRMs for a small business that works in pharmaceuticals, right? It's another to say, can you go to their website, watch the demos, and if it meets the criteria that we've decided on together, sign up for a first meeting, right? You're seeing this action being taken on your behalf. Maybe it is even scheduling, right? All of these things where it starts to move beyond just information and move into real action on your behalf.
I love that. I think the action piece is super important. If you think
Yep.
about your initial interactions with ChatGPT, it's like do a thing, and it
Yeah.
comes back and does a thing, and it didn't do that thing without adding more context to how it was going to accomplish it. It tried to do it
Yeah.
in the machine learning world, you call it single shot, one shot prompting,
Yes.
and the agentic flows are starting to, for example, provide itself tasks. Just like when you start something and you're in your Chrome window and you're like, well, I need to know what this thing is. You know, you're opening a new tab. I need to know what this thing is. You're opening a new
Yeah.
tab. Maybe you're taking some notes to provide context to yourself. And then you're going back to a document and you're reading things. I think that's a big part of what agents are doing as well.
Yeah.
And then to your point, taking action, doing something autonomously on your behalf. So opening
Yep.
those tabs was a thing, taking notes was a thing, maybe transacting on your behalf was a thing. Um, the challenge here, in my estimation, is that when you look at a company that says AI agents for X,
Yeah.
it is what is the X, and then how are you using all these different paradigms within AI agents to solve that problem?
Yeah.
And I like to think of it kind of left to right on a scale of sorts. So, an AI agent can simply go and do very simple tasks for you and maybe look up a couple things, compile some information, and bring it back to you. I
Yep.
think that's a fair definition of an AI agent.
Yeah, ChatGPT and their deep research, right? It is going off, doing legitimate research and writing well formulated reports that they come back on your doorstep, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And then so that's one version, right? It's like
Yeah.
compiling information. I think that is it's funny that we're using on the far left of this scale, the simplest version, but
Yeah.
that is a fair thing, right? Because it's just gobbling up more information to give you information. And then as you start to move, to the right of this scale on what I would consider a more complex AI agent, these are things that are maybe taking your context into place. Maybe they've integrated into different tools and can go into your Google Drive and do something for you, your company resources, and
Yeah.
then generate contextual information based on what they know about you. Maybe they're pushing some type of data out in a structured way to go and place it back in your data warehouse, or maybe they're doing something on your behalf, use scheduling as an example. So
Yep.
as you move to the right, you're starting to see that it can mechanically do stuff that is inside of other systems where you would typically need an engineer to go and
Yeah.
build an integration.
Yeah.
Which is funny. You and I were talking about Zapier, how suddenly it's like the AI
The
agents,
AI agent store. Yeah.
tell me a bit more about that. You brought up to me about how they've been around forever, but suddenly they're an AI agent company.
It's a marketer's dream, right? If you remember, if this, then that, right? That website, like, hey, if this happens, do this action. Same thing with Zapier in the workplace. I'll tell you how we've used it in some cases. Maybe we're mining a Slack channel, and anytime someone says a really good customer quote, we want to extract that and place it in a Google Sheet, right? So now everyone in sales has some great quotes they can use conversationally. Yes, we're using an LLM to extract the quote from some sort of conversational blob, but everything else is on Rails, right? The integration into Slack, the integration into Google, adding a new row to the sheet. Those aren't what I would consider agentic behaviors, but rather some basic workflow automation. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's my caveat here. Um, just as you would think about, you wouldn't get into a taxi or an Uber and say, hey, just drive, right? You give it a destination and you wouldn't say, I need a haircut. Take me to any place that cuts hair. You wouldn't do that. So there are times where you want to give really defined criteria and direction, and that makes sense.
I think this idea of how they interact with these tools is really interesting. In this middle grade, like how that workflow automation happened before what I think the biggest difference is with these agentic flows is they're less defined in a way. You don't have to be so explicit or deterministic around do these four
Yeah.
things. Now the system can kind of look at a set of tools and pick what it needs to do, which I think is the far right of this scale. It's
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you did this, then that, and you complete a set of tasks. Maybe the input data was fuzzier, and these models are really good at getting through and finding what to put in where, what type of data that goes into where. But on the
Yes.
far right, it's the system is doing research, it's thinking and building tasks, and then it is deciding what tools to use on your behalf with your contexts and all of this
Yes.
magical stuff. Um, and the reason that we're building this scale is I don't think there is anything that exists in the far right yet.
That's right.
Um, but that is like the promise, the hype. When you think of AI agents and you you see these like ads, or it's like, look at this team of people doing things for you.
Yeah.
But I think we're a fair bit away from fully autonomous work.
Agreed. And I think
And
this is important for two reasons. How do you use AI agents to help you in the buying process? One thing. And then even when you think about what you're being sold, right? If you are trying to buy software, what's your propensity for risk, right? The dream would be that you would say to an AI agent, look, we've got a lot of wiggle room here. We're really trying to find an AI tool to help us. This is a moonshot. We're willing to be a beta tester. We're looking for the best for this use case, right? As opposed to sending an AI agent off and saying, find me the best CRM. Again, I'm a mid-market company selling pharmaceuticals and you're going to have to help me out, right? Then it's going to go off and it's going to do things and it's probably going to come back with Salesforce. Pretty obvious answer, right? So you may look to the agents to say, this is the risk tolerance I have. Considering that, where would you end up? How would you rate all of this? What rubric can I think through as I go through this buying process too?
I think let's stop there for a minute. We've all
Yeah.
used ChatGPT. I don't know like if you ever use the edit button because it starts to
Yes.
spit out text at you and you're like, you got it wrong. You've taken the wrong turn and you've done something crazy and you have to change what it does. And I
Yeah.
think this in here lies the problem, regardless of single shot calls to ChatGPT or more agentic task based flows, is
Yeah.
that the system is pretty good if you are extremely articulate. But if you think
Oh,
about
good point.
your day to day, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I know Joe, you use ChatGPT a bit different. You got like a monster prompt that always provides context, but most people are just like firing off the thing in their
Yeah.
head that they want done, and they're
Yep.
not stopping to provide preferences,
Yeah.
context, and all this stuff that I think is super important to get a good output.
I think that's so important. And when we think about how we're interacting with communities, and if an AI agent is interacting with communities, even people say, what's the best tool for this, right? What's the best chatbot for my e commerce platform? If you get a response from someone that is a large enterprise company, let's say they're Nordstrom, right? They have time to tailor, to tinker, to customize. So they're going to say their favorite chatbot in this situation. You're going to go, oh, that must be great. But if you're a small company, small shop, and you don't have technical capabilities, you're getting advice with without any context of how it would actually be useful to you. And that is very dangerous. It may help you narrow the list, but it also might send you down the wrong path early on.
I think that is probably I've never thought about it that way, but let's dig on that for just a minute.
Yeah.
So if you talk to a consultant and you explain to them your thing in 5 words, they're going to ask you more questions. They're going to like try to make sure that they're providing you the right context, the right suggestion based on knowing enough about you.
Yeah.
But if you go to deep research and you type in those 5 words, it asks, okay, and then it goes. And
Yeah.
um, this is my personal philosophy: is these tools are amazing, but there's a lot of work to enable them, right?
Yeah.
And that example you just gave right now, right? That single piece of context that maybe you forgot to say,
Yeah.
and now it's off doing something else. Like that, I think is extremely relevant in this
Yeah.
case when we're trying to think about how we use these tools.
That's right. And I think that's why you'll hear us say the things we're learning, we're seeing is build your compass early on. What's your risk tolerance? What are you actually trying to get done? What are you willing to trade off on? Yes, Salesforce is going to do a lot of things, but if you don't need a majority of them, if you really just need something super simple that you could administer on your own, that very much changes the way you judge things, the buying motion you go through. It seems obvious, but you and I have said this a bajillion times. We see the gravitational pull go a lot of ways when you get into a buying process. And if you don't have something to come back to, you get lost along the way.
Exactly that. Exactly that. And I'll always come back to this is that people, like the best buying processes that I've observed, have someone guiding the ship routinely,
Yeah.
and that's no one's getting paid for that.
Yep.
And they just have the best interest in mind for the organization, so they're trying to guide that ship. We are this is a great topic, where but we need to move on.
Let's bow tie
Although
it.
although if you're enjoying listening to Joe and I drone on, thank you. It's like
Yeah.
you're our people.
Thanks,
um
Mom. Thanks, obscure aunt that tuned in. Yeah.
That's it. So we were talking about, so we've defined agents, we've
Yeah.
given this scale. We talked about how do we enable agents. This is something I'm personally passionate about, is giving them the right information.
Yep.
Let's talk about a few examples. So if we think about suppliers, vendors, and how they're using AI agents, what's the big thing right now that everyone's getting excited about?
If I am a vendor, I'm very excited about AI SDRs. I'm also pretty excited about mining these conversations I have with every prospect to understand, are we validating our positioning? Are we saying the right things early on? And how are we being more convincing? If I flip that now, so now I'm a buyer, the exciting thing is doing research, right? So I think something maybe to put a bow tie on this is we're saying ask deep questions of yourself before you ask AI to go do deep research. And that's maybe where the real value is going to lie, right?
Yeah, I think the best interactions are going to
Yeah.
come from the most context being shared at any given point.
Yes.
Speaking of AI SDRs, it's getting a ton of buzz. There's a lot of companies doing it. I hear a lot of positivity and negativity. And then we're recording this a bit late, but then there was this like uh, screenshot or picture taken at OpenAI's announcement where they're quote unquote providing some type of sales agent. Um, I just wonder if the world of AI SDRs are getting turned upside down because of this,
Yeah.
right? Like I wonder if the knowledge of it is a problem and will make people skeptical of every email, of every interaction they have
Agreed.
going forward.
And you think about where the weights are, where the focus is. Daniel Pink says in his book, To Sell is Human, buyers have more information than ever. It's no longer about them looking to sellers to educate them, but ask deep questions. And if you think about a vacuum, I know all the vacuum manufacturers, right? But I want someone to ask me, hey, what's in your house? Do you have pets? Do you have kids? All this influences and helps me guide. You've got to take that on yourself now as a buyer, because what's happening is if you interact with an AI agent that is trying to sell to you, yeah, it's probably going to pull from an optimistic roadmap. Yes, it's probably going to present things in an optimistic way. It doesn't know any better, which means you're getting information that is misrepresented and no one is at fault. It just was given that cue, that focus to do that.
I've never thought about that. So you have an AI SDR.
Yes.
It's trying to write personalized outreach to you because it went and did this agentic flow and found your LinkedIn, found a post that you had about your family, found whatever. And
Yeah.
then on the other end, it's like AI SDR, we are the most amazing company known to man. We're a leader, which it trusts implicitly, right? We're the
Yep.
best at
We're
10
the
things.
only.
And then
Yeah.
it writes an email and it's like, hey, we're amazing. Here are the three things. Isn't that relevant to this? And like, was that email valuable? Like,
No.
I don't even know. And I
Yeah.
think the general consensus is it's people don't think it is. And then the other thing
No.
that freaks me out is that when you eventually talk to a person, they didn't do any research on you.
That's right. Yes, that is, I think, something that we're seeing is we should be looking at, and what we're hearing too is use AI to buy back time. Buy back time to think critically, buy back time to slow down so that when you use AI, you speed up instead of replacing. And you'll hear this a lot, but if you are replacing your critical thinking with AI, you're going to find that that muscle will atrophy, or the person, you as a buyer or you as a seller, are going to come in pretty misinformed, right? And that's not a good place to be.
Well said. I think personally, the how I use AI in my workflow is not to replace as much as it is to harden, to improve.
Yes.
But not everyone takes that point of view, and clearly,
Yeah.
if you think about when companies are trying to build technology like this, it is literally to do more with less.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see the result of output when you have less and you're getting more.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've fully solved that problem yet, and I don't know if models have fully done this.
Not yet.
Um,
My takeaway on this, maybe my like last point that I hope if you come away with anything from what I'm understanding and learning from others, is AI is good at tearing down. Use AI to investigate what you think, what you're looking for, and say, what am I missing? What am I not considering? What am I doing that's potentially a bad idea? And use that as a way to brainstorm how you can, to your point, battle harden what you think you're looking for and how you then go and investigate the market with that lens.
yeah, awesome. Hey, I want to hit one more thing, and then I think
Yeah.
we should let everyone go, even though no one's on this call.
Not everyone.
Is this idea, and this is something that I think everyone does, is they start a search and they Google the company, they Google the vendor, best X, best Y, and they're looking for kind of in the wild experiences, like
Yeah.
genuine experiences with whatever tool or whatever whatever it may be. And I think you do this all the time, right? You're starting a search and you're trying to find these. Like, where are you finding those types of results?
Results in the sense of how people are doing with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, how are you solving this problem in your business? And you're trying to
Yeah.
talk to people, right? You're
Yep.
trying to get those points of view. I tried to tee it up. I failed.
No,
But
no.
my big thing is like we were suffixing the word Reddit on our posts. We're
That's
trying
right.
to find other people. You're going to
Yep.
G2. You're going to these review sites with this assumption that a 0 out of 5 star rating is accompanied by a person that experienced it.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing, in my opinion, a very poor usage of AI agents
Yep.
to go generate kind of babble. I mean, just fake stuff. It's really kind of
For sure.
disappointing.
And you can see it today. You can smell it out, right? The moment you get into a Reddit post and someone says, "I'm trying to solve this problem. What is everyone else doing?" And you get some good feedback, and then you get an obvious AI generated plug for a company. But I think we are starting to cross the point where it's going to be tougher and tougher to realize it's AI generated. And I think the good side of this is if you look at deeper communities like Pavilion, you'll say, "What are you doing for this? How is someone solving it?" And someone will say, "Let's hop on a call and talk about it." Not scalable is a good solution. And I think the problem is that Reddit is too easy to get to. It's too easy to write a short response that's this is the one I like, zero context around how what I like applies to your business. And it's also the easiest to bias by using AI to respond to these threads.
Yeah, yeah. It's disappointing
Yeah.
to just not be able to trust something that I've implicitly trusted for
Yeah.
years now. And hopefully Reddit manages it.
For sure.
Hopefully review sites are driving towards more genuine and useful responses. But until then, you as a buyer need to be very skeptical about these things. I would
Yes.
almost say that they're about as valuable as a piece of marketing material that is on someone's website, which is like kind of a strong statement, right? Like,
That's
you
right.
can't even trust what you're reading.
Yeah.
But let's take a step back. Joe and I are really trying to figure out all these different places where there's technology being poured into these revenue teams, right? These suppliers, AI agents, a huge thing, AI SDRs. Our goal is to help kind of learn and inform as we go.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this was helpful. Any closing thoughts here on this topic of AI agents for buyers?
Be cautious, right? Really trust what you're looking for. Ask yourself those questions. What am I willing to make as a trade-off? Am I open to risk or am I looking for something that's fully baked? And use that to guide how you use AI. I think you'll get to a better result. That's what we're seeing as we talk to others. And it's only going to get better, which brings a lot of gains to you as a researcher as you try to buy, but also a lot of dangers as you start to get sold to as well.
I'll take it's going to get better. The question is how long. I think
Oh,
we're
yeah.
in for a bit of
A
we're in
roller
for a bit
coaster.
of pain
Yeah.
as buyers before it's going to be a truly amazing thing. But yeah, get your ideas on paper. I think the most important thing right now for AI agents is being able to push back on these tools. And if they're trying to automate you away, you better make them do the work, right? And give them the
That's right.
context to do that work well. And then as a result, you will benefit from all of that crazy investment that's happening on the other side.
That's right.
Well, it was awesome. Thanks everyone for listening. This again is the Buying Sucks podcast. We'll jump into our next episode where we continue to talk about other pieces of revenue technology.
See you in the next one.
See ya.